thanks for joining us again for another Bublitz Craft Build. Today I'm going to be showing you how to take natural edge wood pieces like this and turn them into a nice, aesthetically appealing, natural edge entryway table such as this one. So stay tuned.
So I would say this is a medium difficulty build solely because of the leg design that we're going to attempt to do here in this build today. Obviously, you could go with a simple, straight 4-leg design, and that would simplify this up a lot. But if you want something a little different, like we're trying to do, this will walk you through it. So we debated the farmhouse style X, did some calculations for that, ended up deciding, due to the narrow width of our entryway table, it's actually at the edges is only going to be about 10 inches wide. So based off of that, we didn't want such a tall farmhouse X of 36 inches tall and then 10 inches wide. So we ended up coming up with this design, and it involves a little bit of math. So if math scares you, that is a thing. So to determine the length we wanted for our pieces on this side, so we've got 10 inches up top. It's going to be 32 inches of a 2x2 in the center. And then our side slats are going to be these pieces. To determine that and determine the angle that we were going to cut those at, you got to do the Pythagorean theorem basically for the triangle. So we know I decided I wanted 10 inches down. We've got our 2-inch piece in the center. So then we've now got 4 inches on either side of the center for this. So we've got 4 inches up top, 10 inches down that I want this slat to go, and then we're solving for this length over here. So to solve for that length and everything, do your Pythagorean theorem. Came out, it's going to be 10 inches and 24.530 seconds, or so approximately that. Then to solve for our angles that we're looking for, you're going to have to do an inverse tangent or an arctan. There's a great website, Wolfram Alpha. If you can't do that yourself, just plug in the values and they can do that to get you your values. But we're looking at right about 22 degrees is what we're looking for in our angle. So I've set up the miter saw on that. So our top angle is going to be at that 22 degrees. This angle is going to be at 90 minus 22, or about 68 degrees. And cutting 68 degrees on a miter saw is a little complex, but I'll show you a trick to be able to do that. So here we have one of our side legs set up, at least mocked up, as I just showed you on the piece of paper of what it's going to be. So I actually already cut this one out. I'll walk you through the steps of cutting everything out. But as you can see, here's how it looks. We've got our 22 degree angle cut on this bottom, and then our 68 up here, and I'll show you how to do those. So we've got our miter saw set up at that 22 degree mark. Now the trick to get a high angle cut, or the 68 that we're looking for on the one end of the piece, is to take a little board like this. You screw it into your back holes that you should have on your miter saw on the back, mount it in place. You'll have the one board go the full distance. You cut both of these boards at a 45 that way, and then you cut it at a 45 that way. You've now got backer pieces that are set up at a 45. And then we take that to our 22 degree, so 45, 22, that equals 67, what we'll be cutting that at. So you're going to put this board right in, flush up against our 45 degree angle backer, the side flush up against this backer piece, and we've got our set our angle at right there perfectly. And just cut it. Be careful when holding, it is a little You could get a wider piece to get a little more sturdy structure, but this is what I had scrap lying around, so just be careful holding and go slow. And then here you have it. Got our cut perfect to the angle we're looking for. Get rid of that scrap to cut the inverse angle. For your first one, you would measure from the long point here to the long point where you want here. You're already set up at the right angle. You don't even have to adjust that. Since I already have a couple that I cut for setting up the first leg, what I'll do is I'll scribe it to get exactly the exact same length. So I've got that marked up at my 22 degrees. And actually, I want it to be this way. Marked it wrong, so I don't have to adjust the saw. So I've got that line marked, 22 degrees. Set it flush up against our backer piece now, since we're already set at the right angle. Mark up with the scribe. And there you have it. You have our 68, 67 degree for lining up vertically, and then we've got our 22 for lining up with the bottom piece of our leg. So we've got our 32-inch piece in the center. We've got our top and bottom pieces, 10 inches wide, because that's the approximate width of our top piece. Set those out. When it comes to nailing and gluing this up, we'll be doing everything a lot more precise and exact, but just to lay it out. And then these are our four pieces that we just cut. The 67, 68, and then the 22, 23 on the bottom. To reinforce the diagonal slats of our legs, I decided to drill out and insert wooden dowels into the joints. To ensure the table was always level, no matter where I placed it, I drilled holes in the bottom of the legs for adjustable feet. With the legs fully assembled, it was time to stain them. I chose to go with a Minwax Polyshades Pure Black stain. I felt that the black legs would really allow the contrast and color of the natural edge cedar to shine. I left bare wood exposed at the top of each leg to ensure that I achieved a full bond later when gluing the legs to the slab tabletop. Once the legs were finished, I moved on to my natural edge cedar slab top. I cleaned up the slab edges, removing the bark, and then sanding and using wire brushes to get rid of any residue and make a smooth finish. I cut my slab to the desired length using my miter saw, and then cleaned out the last remaining grooves with a wire brush. It was now time to fill in the voids with epoxy. When filling large holes and edges of a slab, it is common to use a mold to hold the slab and fill in around it. I didn't want to change the natural shape and curvature of my top, so I utilized sheathing tape to seal off the areas where I was filling in with epoxy. I chose to keep my epoxy clear so that I could see through the voids and would not distract from the natural color of my slab. Some tips I have learned while working with epoxy in woodworking projects. It's best to do a small pour in voids and holes first before fully filling in that void. This ensures that the wood becomes sealed by the small epoxy pour and prevents leaking out of your epoxy if you did not fully seal it with a sheathing tape. Once your epoxy is poured, it is important to pop any bubbles that appear. Bubbles can be created from mixing or when microscopic voids in the wood slowly are filled in with the epoxy and push the air that was previously there out. Heat is the best way to eliminate bubbles in the epoxy. I use either a propane or butane torch for large areas and then just a long spouted lighter for the tight edges close to the tape. You want to fill the voids and gaps with epoxy slightly above the surface of the wood. This allows you to plane or scrape the excess and then sand the epoxy down to flush with the wood surface. I sanded my epoxy pour flush and then was ready to varnish the top of the slab. I repeated the epoxy and sanding process for my lower shelf and ended up cutting a secondary support piece which I stained black to match the table legs. This piece would go underneath my lower shelf and add to the overall structural stability of my entire table. So I just noticed that my video failed and failed to capture a little bit of what I was doing, but essentially I just was mounting the legs from those recessed holes that we had drilled in tops of the legs going straight into the thing. What I did was I figured out the spacing that I wanted on this side, and I figured out the spacing that I wanted on this side based off of this opening gap for the leg, and then I cut a piece that was the appropriate distance in between them. And once I mounted the first leg, I got it matched up so that it fit, and I could get both sides essentially basically close to parallel for those two legs, so that when I make our bottom shelf, it'll be the same distance both in the front and the back of the legs. But that's all I did. Didn't miss much. Really just screwing in 4 screws to the legs. With the legs mounted to the top slab, I flipped the table right side up and then mounted my support piece to each leg at the appropriate height I wanted, making sure that it was level. Finally, I mounted my lower shelf on top of my support bar. Once I had the lower shelf mounted, the table was complete and ready to be put to use.